So there's one player that I think right now at this point in the offseason is honestly being a little bit overlooked when it comes to this Packers offense. And we focused so much on the receiver room, the depth, the amount of talent the Packers have here on offense, the fact that there's not really a number one guy per se. We saw last season just how much the Packers like to spread the ball around in any different day. It could be another guy's day. One day it's Romeo Doubs. One day it's Shaden Reed. But I think that the player who I'm talking about for this video is Luke Musgrave, tight end Luke Musgrave. And I think there's many different reasons that right now he's being a little bit overlooked. And part of that is because he went down with an injury last season in Week 11, which was right around when Jordan Love was starting to reach that next level, and this Packers offense started to go on a tear. And so Luke Musgrave suffered that lacerated kidney, a grade 4 out of 5 lacerated kidney, and missed the following 6 weeks. And he did come back in Week 18. He played in Week 18. He played in the playoff game versus the Cowboys, and he also played in the game versus the 49ers. But looking at his snap count, you could tell the Packers were just trying to ease him back into game action, and he didn't play a ton of snaps. And so we didn't really get to see really what Luke Musgrave could be over a full season, especially when Jordan Love was starting to play at a top-tier level. Luke Musgrave wasn't really out there much because of this injury. And so right before he got injured, he was playing around 50 to 60 snaps per game. When he came back in the playoffs, Week 18 first, he played in 9 snaps. Played 9 snaps. Then in the playoffs, he played 18 snaps versus the Cowboys, and then 21 snaps versus the 49ers. So he wasn't playing a ton when he came back. The Packers were trying to ease him back in. He did have that one big play versus the Cowboys, which was awesome to see. And so I think going into his second season, just as it is for every other player entering year 2, they have a full season under them, and they now get to go into a next year having a full offseason, just focusing on getting better as a football player, not having to focus on the combine, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that looking at Luke Musgrave, his potential, we saw what he can be. We saw that he can be that field stretcher for the Packers at tight end in the seam. And when you have so many other receiver weapons, guys like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Shaden Reed, and defenses have to account for all that speed, and then you have Luke Musgrave, flying down the seam, it's just a tough task for defenses when the Packers have this amount of speed even at the tight end position. And looking where he played a lot of his snaps last year, 39.2% of Luke Musgrave's snaps last season, which were 334 passing snaps, 39.2% of them were from the slot. So the Packers, in a sense, used him sort of like a receiver, and he's sort of built like that. He's not necessarily your typical, big kind of tight end. He's more of a receiving threat. He had 8.2% of his snaps were out wide, and then 52.1% were in line. And so you add the fact in that he was missing a lot of time because of injury, and during that stretch, it's when Jordan Love reached that next level. And so we really honestly haven't seen what this Packers offense can truly be when all these players are fully healthy. Because imagine, just how much better the Packers offense would have been if during that stretch of 6 weeks where Luke Musgrave was injured, if he had been playing as well, it would have been that much tougher to stop this Packers team. And so if Christian Watson can stay healthy this year, if all these other receivers and tight end Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft can also stay healthy, I think that there's a chance we could see this Packers offense be even better. And I know there's a thought that, can Jordan Love continue the success we saw late last season? I believe the answer is yes. And Jordan Love did that with a ton of injuries across the board at running back throughout the year, at receiver and tight end. And so hopefully the injury problems aren't as bad this year, and we'll really get to see what Luke Musgrave can be going into his second season. And I've heard a lot of things in the past, and there's a belief that, tight ends are, it takes some time for tight ends to develop more so than receivers just because of their different responsibilities. And so I think that there are lots of things pointing towards Luke Musgrave having a much bigger year going into 2024. And even thinking about fantasy football, I don't talk much about it on this channel, but, looking at my fantasy drafts, I've been, debating, do I want to draft Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Shaden Reed? It's always fun to get some Packers players on your fantasy team. But because there isn't a clear number one receiver, and week in and week out, the roles can change, and maybe one guy this year will really sort of take over that role. I'm not sure about that. And so honestly, the way I like to get a part of the Packers offense in fantasy football this year, maybe drafting Luke Musgrave a little later, because he's not really ranked that highly when it comes to tight ends, and I feel like you can get him later, and I think that he has a chance to have a really, really good season, could probably be a top 10 tight end, and I feel like you can get him for a pretty solid value. So I believe in Luke Musgrave, and we'll see if I can get him in my fantasy draft. But those are sort of just my thoughts on Luke Musgrave, and I really think he's going to have a much, much better year coming into 2024. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.